Welcome to the Arrive U.S. Immigration Law podcast with your hosts Jeremy Richards and Christine Jerusik. Join us as we navigate the complex world of U.S. immigration law with a special focus on opportunities and challenges for Canadians and Mexicans under the USMCA. Whether you're a professional, business owner, or family member seeking to work and live in the United States, we're here to guide you every step of the way. So sit back and relax. You have arrived.
Welcome back to another episode of the Arrive podcast. So a lot has happened since we last met together and discussed U.S. immigration law, namely the 2024 presidential election here in the United States. And we know the results. And Donald, is it J? What's his middle name?
I think J, yeah.
Donald J. Trump has been reelected. And will serve a second term as president of the United States. So what has this done? Well, in the immigration world, people are going bananas. They want to know what's going to happen to them. Are they going to get deported? Is the USMCA and the TN visa going to disappear? How long is it going to take to get green cards now? Or are they going to be able to get green cards? Is the United States even going to exist?
Right. Are they going to get rid of the visa that I have? Yeah.
So some valid questions and then some paranoia that often surrounds elections and uncertainty, and people are just worried, and arguably so, about what their future might hold under this new administration. Well, at the same time, he already served as president of the United States for a 4-year term. So we already have a pretty good idea of what it's like to practice immigration law under Donald Trump and what it might look like under his next term. And he's also given us an idea of what he wants to do, what his initiatives are under his next term.
Yeah, there's something new every day.
I know, we were just reading something today about tariffs he wants to impose on Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
Until Canada and Mexico stop the drug trade into the United States.
Drug trade and migrant trade into the United States.
Yeah. So he wants to get that. Anyway, all sorts of stuff.
That's an economic issue, though. Something hopefully.
Well, that's immigration, too. So it's all rolled into one. So every day, just like you said, every day, and this is how it was under Trump when he was president the first time. Every day there was a new tweet, a new comment, a new news story, and people didn't know what to take of it. Well, first of all, most of what you hear in the news during a political campaign, even news stories, pundits, when they're talking, it's all rhetoric. Most of it doesn't come to fruition. They talk, and they analyze, and they opine.
For example,
and a lot
the
of stuff
border
doesn't
wall,
happen.
right? The border wall last time.
Okay, so
right? That's an example.
So that's a segue into what we want to discuss first here, right? What did Trump do in his first term as president? What did he accomplish or not accomplish? But I guess more importantly, how did he impact U.S. immigration as president the first time around? So first, the border wall. Right. So one of his huge initiatives was, let's build that southern border wall to prevent the southern migration into the United States.
Right, an actual physical barricade that was going to prevent people from entering the United States without inspection.
So his infamous border wall, if you remember his first campaign, build that wall, or something like that. It was something like that. That and put her in jail. I don't know. He had something about Hillary about putting her in jail too. But anyway, build the wall and put her in jail were his big things. Well,
yeah, the Hillary's ancient history, but the build the wall is still
around.
Yeah.
So during his first term, however, there was a lot of progress made on that wall. So by the end of his term, about 500 miles of new or replacement wall had been built during his first term. It did face a lot of scrutiny, financial hurdles, to, get the funding to build it, but eventually
environmental hurdles as well.
But eventually he did get the funding, and that wall was being built and making a lot of progress under his first term. So we're likely to see that project resume and that wall continuing to be built, if not completed during his next 4 years. We'll see what happens. But
the problem with the wall is, unless the wall goes all the way, It's not, you can just walk around it.
There's always a way around it, but that is one of his big things.
So
right?
you have to complete the whole wall for it to have any
Trump
impact,
and his supporters want a wall.
Yeah,
they do, and that's likely to happen. So northern border people, why don't they get a wall? That's another question. But I guess that's a discussion for another time.
I think the initiative on the northern border the plan is to increase the initiative on the northern border and increase protections there as well. So there may be some impact we see that's going to be similar to what is happening on the southern border.
And we have seen a lot more individuals trying to come through the northern border like they have in the southern border over the last several years. So there has been an influx, and people think that illegal immigration only happens through the southern border. Well, that's completely and utterly false. People illegally immigrate to the United States all the time through airplanes, through boats, through northern borders, through southern borders, through all sorts of means, right? There's no way in the end to stop it all.
Well, I think for the most part, though, people who are arriving in the United States aren't entering without inspection, which I think is what you're referring to as someone illegally entering.
They're
entering with inspection as a visitor or in some other status, and then they overstay.
They violate the terms of their visa.
Right.
Somehow.
So even a wall, if you build the biggest wall in the world, isn't going to prevent that from happening because they're already here in the United States legally.
Someone comes as a student and then they never leave.
Right.
They come as a visitor and they never leave.
Yes, and I think that's the bigger concern. The wall is, I think, a more visual
it's an easy thing to grasp a hold of and to get a rallying support behind. Yeah.
Right.
So the border wall. Number 2, travel ban. And this was a huge one. This one saw an outcry throughout the world, right? Trump's infamous Muslim ban is what, if you want to call it that. So one of his first executive actions, Trump issued a travel ban targeting several predominantly Muslim countries. And that it led to widespread protests and legal challenges. And he had to revise this bill because it was challenged in the court system, and a redacted version was ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court. What did that do for immigration? And I think that's what we want to discuss. Well, it made it significantly more difficult, if not impossible, for certain individuals to come to the United States under Trump's presidency.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw that mainly impact family-based immigration. People trying to bring in their relatives that were among these countries that Trump had targeted as he blacklisted them. Right. So if you were from one of these countries, your ability to immigrate to the United States, if wasn't completely removed, what happened is they made it so slow and so difficult that it was ultimately not possible, is what happened.
Right. So we had several consulates that were just not processing visas for people with certain backgrounds at that point in time.
Yep.
So it did really impact family reunification during that first administration.
Yep. And that one saw a lot of outcry. And ultimately it was upheld, and he was able to implement some of these bans. And a lot of individuals and families, even employers and employees, if you were doing business in those countries or coming from those countries, were impacted by that.
But we can safely say that once that administration ended, a lot of these bans and things that slowed the process down or stopped the process went away, and then the process resumed. So a lot of people that were negatively impacted at the time were ultimately, eventually able to immigrate.
Yes.
When the next administration
took over. It was just substantially delayed.
Substantially delayed. But if your ultimate goal is to come to the United States, there's no better time than to start now. And if the process is slowed or stopped, there's a good chance
you're in the system.
You're in the system, and there's a good chance that when things change down the road, because the only thing constant is change, that you will ultimately be successful in your case.
Yep. That's good advice. Get started. You don't know what the future is going to hold, but at least if you start the process, you're in the system. DACA in the Dreamers, if you're familiar with that, deferred action for childhood arrivals. And that was implemented under President Obama. Mm-hmm. And I remember when that took took effect under Obama. It was actually, was it 2008? I don't want to put a date on it, but it wasn't 2008. It was around 2010 or 2011. I'm trying to figure out in my mind. It was when I first started practicing on my own is when it happened. And I remember being at an AILA conference when he passed. It was in Tennessee. Yeah, I was in Nashville, Tennessee. There was an AILA conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And they were talking about, oh, you guys need to go blog on this. You need to talk about this. This is huge. DACA through President Obama. Anyway, DACA is a temporary program for certain individuals who entered the United States as children with their parents. And it gives these individuals authorization to work and live in the United States under this temporary status because of their situation, coming as children. And this program has to be renewed. It's not a permanent program, and it doesn't give these individuals permanent status. So that is something that Trump tried to overturn and do away with, but he was unsuccessful at. And it's still a program that is available. But the fear is these individuals under this program are all registered. Then we know the government knows who all these individuals are.
And they've been here since they were children.
Yeah. But their fear is Trump is threatening mass deportations and the like. Well, what about these individuals? What's their future hold? Is DACA going to be around for them for the near future? Is there going to be a path? And this is the Dreamers Act, right? They want a path to permanent residencies for these individuals. Or is there going to be some sort of, I guess, retaliation or rescinding of it and program. Removal of these individuals from the United States?
So that's uncertain. We're not sure
we don't know.
Way that's going to go.
But that's, a lot of people are fearful of what might happen to that program.
And rightfully so.
The other one, and this was a huge one, if you were in the immigration community as a practitioner, the public charge rule under Donald Trump. So the public charge rule was tightening restrictions on immigrants who could potentially rely on public benefits to make sure that those being sponsored to come to the United States wouldn't rely on public benefits. And there was a new form. Do you remember the form? I can't remember the form.
Oh, I don't remember the number of it, but it had.
Forget it.
Yeah, it just.
So there was a few months that
questioning finances.
Finances, you had to get a credit check. It was actually quite ridiculous what had to be put on this form, above and beyond what is currently required, or that was even required before this form.
Right, and what we're referring to is when you sponsor somebody, either an employer or a family member, you have to demonstrate that you can financially support that person inside the United States. And this additional layer of financial reporting was started under President Trump's last administration so that the U.S. person really had to show a lot of what was going on in their financial life.
Immigrant. We had people that you had to get credit checks.
Yes.
Well, to get a U.S. credit check, when we eventually learned how to go through the system to get it without a social security number, but these individuals don't have credit in the United States.
No, I know.
Some of them might have, maybe if they came as a student or something, but most of them, what do you mean? They don't have credit in the U.S. So it was this burdensome form that had to be completed that just really complicated the process of sponsorship for the financial affidavit part of sponsoring.
But the good news is it was short-lived because I think it got overturned
so we scrambled to file all these cases with this form, and then we showed up at our interviews at USCIS, and I remember sitting in front of the officers and they're like, yeah, this isn't required
They
anymore.
Basically took it and threw it in the garbage in front of you.
But it did cause a lot of turmoil in the immigration world for individuals and employers sponsoring, foreign nationals.
It put an extra layer of reporting and requirements into an already complex process. So we could see something like that again. That's a good way to slow down immigration and to make it more complicated for people to sponsor family members, is to put extra reporting requirements and financial requirements in place. So we may see something like that again.
And that brings up one of the other things that Trump did under his administration, and that was interviews. So if you look at the process right now under Biden, there are virtually no interviews with USCIS if you are doing a marriage-based case
Unless there's complicating factors in your case. If it's a straightforward case.
Extreme complicating factors. How many marriage-based interviews have you been into in the last 4 years?
Well, I've been to...
In the last 4 years. I've been to like
a couple.
2.
Yeah, just a handful.
When under Trump, it was every single case had an interview.
Yeah, that's not because we don't have a lot of cases like that.
No,
it's just because
Biden's
the majority
policy
is
changed.
Right.
And if the case was adequately supported, you just get approved. Green cards are going to show up in the mail. And that's how it's currently happening. The vast majority of our cases do not go to interview.
No, because
they're waived.
Right, because we properly document all of the cases and all the evidence is in there so they can make a decision on the basis of the paper. Yep. You don't need to see the people face to face.
And I was at USCIS a week or maybe 2 weeks ago because we still go for naturalization interviews. Mm-hmm. Those are still in person. And an officer that I've been seeing for years looked at me and he's like, wow, I haven't seen you in a while. And I was like, yeah, like, because you guys don't do any interviews anymore.
Right. You still work here?
So they don't have those interviews because they're waived under Biden as long as the documentation, meets scrutiny.
Right.
On
so
its
we
face.
may be back there again.
And not only back there again, under Trump, not only were there marriage-based interviews, but there were employment-based interviews. There were removal of condition interviews. There was essentially an interview for every potential green card that you could get under Trump. And he did that under the guise of security checks. They added that level of security to ensure that these people that are getting green cards to the United States were properly vetted.
Show up face to face and answer questions.
Yep.
And I'll be honest with you.
And it really slowed down the process.
Well, and what slowed down the process is the challenges that resulted from these interviews. So things before President Trump was the president that would go through without challenge were now being challenged regularly by the officers. So there was, the law didn't change per se, but the way it was being administered changed. And the officers were challenging everything they could get their hands on.
Yep. It gave these officers the opportunity to challenge cases. Mm-hmm. And under Biden, if you even go back farther to Biden, most marriage-based cases had interviews. Most removal of conditions cases, which is if you had a temporary green card, then you had to go back for a second interview based on marriage. 2 years
Are you
later.
talking? No.
Under Biden, yeah. Or not on Biden.
No.
Obama, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Obama. I'm going farther back. Obama.
What Biden are you talking about?
Well, he was vice president at the time.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
So under Obama, the majority of marriage-based cases had interviews, and select employment-based cases had interviews, but most employment-based cases didn't even have interviews.
No, they
wouldn't. And then so Trump ratcheted that up, where all of them went to interview. Now you go to Biden, where almost none of them have interview. So what did that do? It created massive delays and backlogs in the process under Trump.
It's an extra step.
Yep. Everyone had to go to an interview. So it requires more U.S. government resources, more time, and delays in issuance of immigration benefits.
And then the additional challenges.
Yes. So more denials based on these interviews as well. So that's something we're likely to see again.
I think so too.
A resumption of in-person interviews. What's that going to do? Well, your green cards are going to take a lot longer to get. Your immigration benefits are going to take a lot longer to get.
You know what they should do? They should do Zoom interviews.
They did under
I know
during
during COVID, but I think that
ones.
if they just did that, then it'd
be more convenient. So immigration court system
be faster.
Went to
Zoom
and telephonic hearings. They still do a lot of them that way.
They do
because they found it's much more convenient. So those were some of the major things under Trump. Two more things that happened under Trump too were, one of them was with the Department of Labor, and it was the prevailing wage fiasco, and I'll refer to it as a fiasco. Well, Department of Labor is involved in the H-1B visa process as well as the green card process, and they have to issue what's called a prevailing wage before a U.S. employer can hire a foreign employee on an H-1B visa or before they can sponsor them on a green card. And this prevailing wage dictates, it's essentially a minimum wage for foreign workers in the U.S. to make sure these foreign workers aren't making less money than similarly situated U.S. workers. You want to make sure that these foreign workers have the same rate of pay, same benefits available to them, and they're not undercutting the U.S. labor market. Well, this process has been around for years with the Department of Labor. Well, Trump came in and he said, you know what? Not only do we want to make sure that foreign workers are paid similarly to U.S. workers, we want them to be paid more than U.S. workers. So if an employer wants to hire a foreign worker, they're going to have to pay
a premium
to hire that foreign worker. So what did they do? They increased and significantly increased these prevailing wage determinations. And the prevailing wages that were coming out under this new rule under Trump were insane. You're talking a job like here in Buffalo, and we had a client who was trying to do the green card process. These prevailing wages, a typical prevailing wage would be, let's say, $150,000 for this job, right? It was an executive level position. Came back well over $250,000. The employer's like, this is insane.
I know. I had the same
We're
thing.
not paying this person that. We don't pay U.S. workers that.
Yes.
Why would we hire a foreign worker and pay him this?
Yes.
So it was a huge disruption to not only the H-1B visa program, but also to the green card program, where employers were like, nope, we're not doing that. We're not paying that.
Right. So now there's employers in a situation like that can't find a U.S. worker to fill the role. There's not a qualified U.S. worker around, but they also can't afford to pay a foreign worker because the wage they need to pay them is so extraordinarily high.
Yep.
It was not good for U.S.
Can't
employers.
find anyone, and you can't bring
fire,
in foreign labor
you can't
because
bring
it's
in your
gonna
own.
be way too expensive.
Exactly.
So that ultimately was reversed, and then prevailing wages went back to normal. But during that time period, it created a major disruption in the H-1B and the green card process.
Yes.
So
it did.
who knows? That could be
Could
something
happen
we
again.
could face again.
But I think did that start and end with that administration? Or did it end before?
No, it ended
end of his-
before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think
It was
they
challenged
recognize
and
the error
overturned.
of their ways, hopefully.
But here's a side effect of it. Just like the interviews that Trump mandated, it created backlogs. The prevailing wage system and the
Right.
green card system has not recovered from that. And if you were talking to us 4 years ago about how long does it take for an employer to sponsor somebody through PERM if they're from Canada? Oh, you could get your green card within a year. Pretty quick.
Right.
Not now. It's 4 to 5 years for
Yes.
that process.
Yep.
So that started the backlogs. Then you had COVID that increased the backlogs, and now it's insane. The wait times are just out of control. So if anything like this happens again, well, what's it going to do? What's going to create even more
so
backlogs?
employers are going to be waiting 5-6 years for someone who's
That they
on
need
the regular list.
Yep.
Right. So
For people
anybody
that
from
would-
the all chargeabilities area.
Yep. From countries like Canada, you're going to be waiting insane amounts of time. And that doesn't even include other countries
No.
that have 15, 20-year
Correct.
waits, right? Those are just all going to get longer and longer and longer.
Well, that's a prediction. Maybe it won't. So there were things.
Maybe not.
I mean, there were things that I remember, and maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but the visa bulletin in my recollection,
It was current.
it was current a lot of time during the last Trump administration because
More so
less
than it is
people
now.
were filing applications.
Yep.
So there's an argument to be made that it could go the other way. And rather than taking longer, it could move faster.
Yeah, that's true. The visa backlogs were not as great as they are now.
So here's the answer. We don't know.
We don't know.
We're going to have to see.
But hey, these are things that we did see. Now, what has Trump promised? I love promises that presidents make.
I mean, are these
Did
really
you see what
promises?
Biden-
Are they allowed to promise anything?
They promise all the time. Do you see what Biden's promising? Well,
No, I didn't
remember
see
one of
that.
his big campaign promises? if you were a student, you know what it is. He was going to forgive all student debt or whatever up to $50,000, and then that changed multiple times throughout his presidency.
Yeah, but they
on
also,
his dying. No, right now he's on his deathbed, right? And I'm not saying he's dying. I mean, deathbed of his presidency. His presidency is about to end, right? So one of his last actions before he leaves office, he's still trying to push more student loan forgiveness, right?
Jeez.
He's going to die on that sword. Anyway, so.
But there were
Trump's
other
promises-
things that he promised, which
A lot of
didn't
other
come to
things.
fruition in immigration as well.
He was
Which,
promised to reform immigration. That didn't happen.
well, yeah, and then he was going to count visas. He was going to count one per family instead of
yeah.
so the visa bulletin would progress.
Instead of what's
It
happening
never
now.
happened.
Yeah. Huge backlogs. So what is he crying right now? What's making people concerned and about
There's
their
lots.
future in the United States?
Mass deportations.
That's probably the number one, right?
Yeah, that just sounds scary, doesn't it?
Yeah. So even if Trump goes forward with that, which he likely is, he did it under his first administration. Guess what, people? They would have to, and I forget what the numbers are, but they would have to hire an absurd
I think he's saying
amount
11
of
million.
ICE agents as well as immigration judges to even make that happen. There's something over 1 million people already in the deportation line waiting to be deported from the United States already. And now you're going to do mass deportations on top of that without the infrastructure to support
Well, and
it?
I think that's
Anyway.
the camps, right? Because where are we going to put these people while we're waiting to process them? And that's the
New detention facilities.
Right.
So, yeah. So they don't have the infrastructure, the finances, or anything in place to make these things happen.
and that will take time.
A lot of time. It could even take more time than you have as a president, right?
Yes. Good.
So on that note, I mean, immigration laws are what they are.
Mhm.
So if you're going to violate immigration law, you're going to face deportation. You know, is it going to happen today or tomorrow? Who knows? But
Right.
in the
so
end,
the advice remains the same.
yeah,
Just-
if you don't violate immigration law, you're not going to get deported. And that's what people are like, oh, am I going to get deported? No, it's not rounding up people that are here legally and just kicking them out of the country.
right.
This is people that are violating immigration laws that are under the target of that. So, but still creates some hysteria there and some uncertainty for individuals who are trying to live and work in the United States. Border wall expansion, we already hit on that, right? It's likely to resume the construction of that border wall, if not the completion of the border wall. That is a huge promise of Trump, and he that's another one he's going to
Good luck. It's
die on that
it's
promise, right?
I think 500 feet got built. 500 miles. 500 miles got built under his last administration with all the promises and everything. I think there's another 1,500 miles to go. So he's going to have to triple his efforts to get that completed.
And to help with his deportation, he's said he's prepared to declare national emergency, get the military involved to help with these deportations and in the border wall and all of this. So rhetoric, in my opinion, you know, we'll see if this actually comes to fruition. There's a lot of talk around the border wall, mass deportations, how that's going to happen.
But it looks good, and his base is excited about it. So there's that.
Yeah, it blows my mind. I mean, this country relies on immigrant labor, right? For us to do what we do as Americans and enjoy what we enjoy, we have to have foreign labor to do that. And in the end, we're all immigrants in America anyway. I think
Very
people
true.
forget how this country was founded and where it came from. And foreign labor is very much needed. If you're an employer right now and you're trying, I get calls all the time. I had this call yesterday. This individual said, and the way that he phrased it was interesting. He said, I want to hire a bunch of Mexicans. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Well, the individual works in fiber optics, and they lay fiber optic cables underground. And they don't have the labor necessary to dig these tunnels to put these fiber optic
yeah, there's
cables
a
in.
lack of Americans
He's like,
working in general labor.
I could hire a bunch of, you know, and this isn't derogatory, labor from Mexico to come in and help build these tunnels because they're willing to work hard and do these jobs where we can't find people in America to do this work. Why is it so hard for me to hire these laborers legally to do this work in America? And the immigration system currently doesn't support a lot of these needs that employers have.
Right.
And there aren't U.S. workers. In our day, it was teenagers and, young people would take those jobs, right? It wasn't their career, but they'd go do that job to earn themselves some money. Now they're not taking those types of jobs anymore. It's very hard to find people to go into manual labor, even the trades or anything like that. And it's very hard for employers to find people to fill those roles. And it's going to be an ongoing problem unless something's done about it from an immigration perspective. So what does this mean in the end? These things we've been talking about, what happened under Trump, what might happen under Trump. Well, as immigration lawyers, it's nothing that we haven't dealt with before. We've worked under many different presidents with many different agendas, and we navigate within the immigration law to be able to provide our clients with the benefits that they're looking for in the United States from an immigration perspective, to work and live in the United States. And might it be a little more difficult, a little more cumbersome, take longer under a new administration? It might, but it may not. Like you said, Christine, maybe some things do speed up. Some things may take longer, but some things may become easier as well in a new administration. In the end, we don't know, but we're prepared to assist our clients to navigate U.S. immigration law, to help them to work and live in the United States, just as we have under this current administration, the previous administration, and the administration before that.
And the one that comes next.
So it's only 4 years.
Right.
And I like to remind people that I talk to over the phone, a lot of them are Canadians questioning whether or not the TN is going to be around or the e-visa as an investor. And I remind them, well, under the first term of President Trump, there were e-visas. Under the first term of President Trump, guess what happened? He actually signed the USMCA, which replaced NAFTA. So he signed the current agreement under which you can get TN status as a Canadian or Mexican. Very unlikely that he's going to rescind that.
Yeah, he didn't change it.
He adopted it.
He literally didn't change anything.
Nope.
So,
same professions with the same antiquated requirements and everything.
So I think the free trade agreement is what, it used to be called. And, with the suggestion that there's going to be tariffs, that might change the agreement in that regard.
May slow down the transfer of goods and services back and forth.
Right. And maybe the agreement goes away, I think, is what people are concerned about, that if he's going to institute these tariffs, this agreement can't hold because it's counter to what that agreement says. So perhaps there will be changes to it. We don't know at this point. We just have to wait and see. Hopefully any changes that, I think it would be crazy for them to to rescind the whole agreement and remove the TN opportunity that Americans also enjoy going to Mexico and Canada. There's plenty of Americans working under the USMCA in those two countries. So it's not just an impact on people coming to the U.S.
Yeah. It impacts Americans equally.
Right.
That's a good point. So a lot to look forward to when you're working in the immigration world, right?
It's never boring.
Never boring. But we've always been able to help people live and work in the United States under whatever administration. And we're going to continue to assist our clients with this ever-evolving landscape of immigration and whatever new administrative actions or policies or agendas may be pushed forward. We've dealt with them. We've ridden the roller coaster, and we're prepared to ride that roller coaster again. So.
Right, and it's easy to keep abreast of it if you follow us online and sign up for our blogs, because then you'll get notice when it happens, because we're pretty good about putting out new information.
Yeah, our blogs are amazing. So if you go to our website and you go into our resources tab and you subscribe to our weekly blogs, then you will stay up to date on the changes in immigration.
And there's going to be changes.
There will be. And tuning into the RI podcast, as well as if you find us on YouTube, we put out videos as well where we discuss U.S. immigration law to help you stay informed. So thank you for tuning in once again. If you found, our conversation helpful, share it with your friends or colleagues or others out there that might find this content helpful. If you haven't already, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and thank you for tuning in, and hope to have you join us again next time.